everyone, to tonight's candidate night. This is co-sponsored. It was organized by Save Our North End Waterfront and is co-sponsored by NEWRA. Sydney asked if I would moderate, and I can never resist a loaded offer, so I said yes, because I like to talk. But tonight you won't hear me talk all that much, because we have an exciting slate of candidates, all the state senate candidates for the open position that we could get are here. We have 6 people who acknowledged and said we're going to come. There are some other candidates that we didn't hear back from. We're trying to bring everyone that we can to you, and we have a pretty exciting evening. We have sort of a town hall style format where we have folks who have created questions. The candidates have gotten all the questions beforehand, so they've had time to think about it. But we're still going to have folks read them from the audience, although I will start with the first question. Some administration to cover. We are being recorded by Matt Conti, NorthEndWaterfront.com, who records many of our North End events. So I'm sure the candidates are used to saying things on record, but if anyone has any murmurs, you don't want to have one of those moments where you say something you don't want to be on tape. Just for those of you who don't know, I'm the president of the North End Waterfront Residents Association, NEWRA, co-sponsor of this event. NEWRA is a member organization, and at the end of the evening, there are some NEWRA representatives here. If you're a resident of the North End and want to join the Residents Association, we'll make that easy for you. But without further ado, we're going to do the candidate night using this style. I'm going to ask each candidate to introduce themselves. We will have each candidate please keep your introduction to 2 minutes. Once the introductions are completed, then we're going to have a question asked, and then every candidate will have 3 minutes to answer that question. Now, if we start going really slow and starting to run out of time, I reserve the right to take the later questions and zip it down to 2 minutes. But we're going to try to do 3 minutes per question, and we should get a lot of discussion. We're going to try to do some. We're going to try to keep it at pace. My job is to keep it at pace without anything more. Let me start from left to right to ask the candidates to introduce themselves. Starting with
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joseph Boncore. I'm a resident of Winthrop, and I'm a practicing attorney. In Winthrop, I'm chairman of the Winthrop Public Housing Authority. I've been an advocate for public housing for my entire career. I'm a public defender in the district courts of the Boston Municipal Court, which is the court for this area. And there I stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. I'm running for state senate because I believe in this district. I believe the change needs to come to this district, and I see the change that needs to come. In the courts every day, I deal with people who suffer from mental health disabilities, and the Commonwealth is not making resources available to help those people, and they begin the process of self-medication in terms of opiate abuse and other abuses of narcotics and other substances. It's an issue I see and deal with every day in a practical way, and I think the Commonwealth needs to start dealing with that issue in a practical way. As vast as this district is, housing is an issue. Housing is an issue I dealt with in the Public Housing Authority, and it's an issue not just below in affordable housing, but housing even in our own neighborhoods. We need to strike a balance in this neighborhood and other neighborhoods throughout the district and bring communities together to figure out this housing crisis in this area. Education is also an issue that I'm an advocate for and will advocate for in the state senate. I know I'm running out of time, but I want to let everyone know in this room that I stand against the Lewis Wharf Hotel. I want to thank the residents of Lewis Wharf who hosted me for a coffee hour not too long ago, and I promise to stand with Representative Aaron Michlewitz and Council Sal Laventina against that issue. I only have 2 minutes, so if anyone has any further questions of me that we don't reach tonight, because I may have to leave early as well, please visit my website at boncore4senate.com or contact me directly at joe@boncore4senate.com. Thank you all for being here. It's so important that you get to know the candidates. Thank you.
Lydia hasn't been meeting Lydia Edwards from East Boston, so we're going to go to Diane.
Everyone. Just want to tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm running. I am the daughter of immigrants who struggled and really fought to stay in the middle class. And growing up, I remember how much they worry about money all the time. And as much as they tried to hide it from me and my little brother, that feeling of insecurity and instability, it was always there, and it's always stayed with me. And there was a moment where my mom lost her job, and then my dad lost his job, and that was their worst fears come true. I think that my story is the story of this district. As diverse as it is, going from East Boston to Winthrop, Chinatown, coming around, North End obviously coming around to Cambridge and Beacon Hill. No matter who you are or where you come from, whether you immigrated here 100 years ago from southern Italy or 10 years ago from El Salvador, we all have the same hopes and aspirations, but we also have the same fears. I'm running because I believe that the people of this district deserve to be represented by someone who not only understands their issues and is willing to fight for them, but someone who's willing to live that struggle. I've spent my entire career working within the system to change the system. That includes time as a staffer at the State House, to running the Caucus of Women Legislators and time at City Hall, and also creating the country's only political leadership organization for Asian American women, really mentoring young people so they can learn more about government and become advocates like all of you. I have spent my entire career advocating and fighting for women, immigrants, and working families because that's who I am and that's where I come from. And in order to do that, I built coalitions and built lasting relationships that mean I can start on day one and hit the ground running as state senator. I'm so proud to be endorsed by the only 2 women of color in the state Senate because they know my values, they know my work, and they believe I can win. And I'm also, I'll just parrot him, I'm also against the Lewis Wharf project, and I'm so grateful for all of you being here tonight.
Thank you. Before we go on, I just want to point out this sound. That's hopefully a sound we'll never hear, but if someone goes over, like really over, you might hear it. But we're going to try to avoid that sound at all costs. That wasn't a setup for Jay. Representative Jay Livingstone.
Feel the pressure. Hi, my name is Jay Livingstone. I'm a state representative. I represent the West End, Beacon Hill, Back Bay, and parts of Cambridge, and have for the last 3 years. When I went to the legislature, I wanted to work on a bunch of things, and I've had a lot of success. First was early education. You can help kids between 2 and 6. They have much better life outcomes. They go to college more frequently. They graduate high school more frequently. They commit fewer crimes. So many families, though, can't afford to give their kids that head start. And I've worked on that in the legislature, been able to secure millions of dollars of funding, help thousands of kids get that head start that their parents wouldn't have otherwise been able to afford. Also, I used to be a prosecutor in Middlesex County, and I saw the ravages of drug abuse, which have only gotten worse and more dramatic since I left, or the headlines have gotten more dramatic. And I've worked on that in the legislature, increasing treatment, working to increase treatment funding and decreasing incarceration rates. It costs half as much to put somebody in inpatient treatment as it does to incarcerate. And we've increased treatment funding by 65% in my time in the legislature. I also joined with a group of legislators to start talking about criminal justice reform. And there was, I think, 6 of us in the first meeting. We've grown to over 100, trying to get rid of a lot of the mandatory minimums from the 80s that don't make sense anymore. In this term, my top priority is equal pay for women. I learned, I don't know, a few years ago that there was still this persistent gender gap in Massachusetts, despite the fact it's been illegal to pay people differently based on gender for 70 years. So I reached out to the National Organization for Women of Massachusetts chapter and said, how can I help? I ended up the lead sponsor of the bill. Over 100 of my colleagues in the House of Representatives co-sponsored the bill, and just unanimously passed the Senate a couple weeks ago. Also in my role as state representative, I've dealt with a lot of projects like this. In my district and close to my district, there's been billions of dollars of development approved by the BRA in the time I've been a state representative. I think in the first 6 months I was a state representative, the BRA approved about $4.5 billion worth of development in my district and close to it. And I've worked very hard to make sure that the community's voice is heard with respect to every bit of that development. Every project that I've worked on has been improved for the community's benefit throughout the district. And I will have stood with the community on projects opposing it, such as this one, and I would do so with you here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Floyd. My name is Dan Rizzo, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to be here tonight. I know most of you are here to talk specifically about the hotel, so I'm just going to give a very brief introduction. I've been in public service now for the last 16 years. Actually, I guess you could go back and look at my 6 years that I served in the military, my younger days. But along the way, I went into business for myself, found my way into some nonprofits, and ultimately served 12 years in the city council and the last 4 years as mayor of the city of Revere. And I'm running for this seat because I think I'm uniquely qualified to understand the issues that impact not only my city of Revere, but the broader district, the senatorial district that makes up the First Suffolk and Middlesex district. We all have the same wants, we all have the same needs. And a lot of the experiences that I've had as mayor, working firsthand with the legislature on these issues, such as local aid that impacts the city of Boston, Cambridge, Revere, Winthrop. We deal with these issues every single day, and we know how important that local aid is to communities. I would be a huge advocate as someone coming from the municipal side that understands what the legislature needs to do to trickle down those dollars into the municipalities. There's areas, not so much the North End. In fact, the North End, thankfully, is one of the safest neighborhoods in the city of Boston. But there are other neighborhoods that aren't so safe. They just rounded up 57 violent MS-13 gang members in East Boston. And so there's areas, parts of this district that need attention. As mayor, over the last 4 years, we've reduced crime by 15%, and we've added 25% to our roles on the police department without any Proposition 2.5 overrides. It's a matter of priorities. Education-wise, we know that our kids need to be educated. We're in a very competitive world now. Thankfully, back in 2014, Revere High School was named #1 in the country by the National Center for Urban School Transformation out of San Diego State, based on a series of metrics, kids moving on to four-year colleges, kids graduating, dropout rates down. It's important that we pay attention to our school districts, particularly the ones that are underperforming. And as far as transportation, I don't think there's a day that goes by that one of us doesn't pick up, or all of us don't pick up the paper and read a story about the MBTA. And the MBTA does have serious issues. The other day, they were thrilled that they only have a $143 million budget deficit as opposed to a $242 million budget deficit. That's unacceptable. By the year 2040, there's going to be twice as many people using public transportation today as there are today. So I want to thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity, and I look forward to answering some questions here tonight. Thanks.
And finally, from East Boston, Paul Rodgers.
Good evening, everyone, and again, thank you for coming out here tonight. My name is Paul Rodgers. I'm a resident of right over the harbor here on the other side, about 3,500 feet across the harbor in East Boston. I'm also a small business owner. I've been a small business owner for 20 years, technology and software. But I think the reality is most people know me locally for my work out in the community. Much like this event here tonight, bringing people in and talking and discussing about issues of the day, I've been managing a online version of this for, well, we started out with just a couple dozen members, but now we're about 5,000 plus members strong, talking about the issues in both English and Spanish, which is important for the local community in East Boston. But more importantly, we do a lot of community events and cleanups and coursework, training for emergency first aid and courses such that are valuable for the public. But we've become such an entity unto itself, we've become a very powerful political force for change in the community. So giving that voice out to the community has been has helped push the neighborhood forward on a lot of issues. So issues that are important to me, obviously, that tie into what we're talking about here tonight, housing and development issues. Clearly, when I'm out at meetings, talking to people at meetings, the community, neighborhood-related meetings on all kinds of different proposals that end up going back to the BRA for inevitable approval, as we've often seen. People want to have their voices heard on issues, and they want to have a say in what's happening in their community. And we see that right here, with this development, the hotel development proposal that we'll be talking about here tonight. And I'm not necessarily opposed to development, but the reality is we need to have more community and neighborhood input on how development actually happens and what is appropriate and what's not appropriate for certain areas. That we're talking about here right here on the harbor front and waterfront. The development we're talking about here for the hotel, I am steadfastly in opposition to it. Whenever the community speaks on these kinds of issues, I think the community takes the upper hand in what they need to decide for their future, for what their neighborhood will look like. So I'm steadfastly in support of the neighborhood organizations, and I'm always time.
Yeah.
Well, again, my name is Paul Rodgers, and I look forward to answering your other questions here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for those introductions. Just to recap the rules, we'll ask the questions, either myself or one of the questioners. We'll go around. I'll call on each one of you to answer. You'll have a little more time to answer the questions, 3 minutes. Closing at the end of the 3 minutes, I'm going to wave my red pen. If that doesn't capture your attention, I'm going to start making noise and I'll flash the trackball, the red trackball at you guys. Hopefully that will capture someone's attention. If all that fails, you might just hear the chime, but we're going to try to avoid that. So let me get into the questions. I'm going to kick off with the first one. So Boston, our fair city, is ranked as the sixth most vulnerable city in the nation for environmental damages associated with climate change. That means our city has a greater responsibility to ensure that projects, businesses, institutions, and residents are prepared for the climate conditions of tomorrow, which include rising sea levels and record storm surges, which we have experienced here. Among other communities statewide and within First Suffolk and Middlesex districts, Boston's North End is particularly vulnerable to the damages of climate change. So the question is, what is your position on development in areas of the district that are at risk for environmental damages associated with climate change? Joe, could we start with you, Joe?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the state and the Commonwealth needs to be cognizant, especially in this district that's so surrounded by water, and everyone's heard of the FEMA flood maps and the new flood map plans that are coming out. It's a federal issue and something we need to work with our federal legislators on immensely. Some of the city planning stuff, as you know, is a city issue. But as your elected representatives, as your state senator, I would be able to work with your city councilors and the mayor's office and ensure that your voice is being heard at these meetings and at BRA meetings, and to make sure community impact is heard. I think that developers who are developing in areas that are subject to climate change and on the water, those projects need to be more heavily scrutinized. And I think we need to legislate that through the Department of Housing and Community Development, which you may or may not know does have the BRA does fall under that. Even though the mayor appoints the BRA, the Department of Housing and Community Development legislates the BRA. And it's important that projects on the waterfront are more highly scrutinized with environmental concerns as a top priority in developing on the waterfront. Thank you. I don't need the whole 3 minutes. I don't think.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next, Diane.
I would say that climate change is very real, and it's not abstract, particularly for this district, for this community. And if we don't do something right now, immediately, the North End could be underwater and the shoreline could be in Brookline in 20 years. And so I think what we really need to be talking about is solutions to preserve this neighborhood against the ravages of climate change and the very real risks we face. So that means bringing in Army Corps of Engineers and planning. It involves master planning for this area so that we can really attack this problem and be able to develop the things that are appropriate and right with strong community involvement, so that once we decide as a community what we want here, we can build it quickly. I don't need to.
Fantastic. We're moving right along, aren't we? Jay, please.
Thank you. With respect to any development, there has to be a strong community-driven process where the community has a say in what goes on in their neighborhood. And I've worked on that before I was a state representative. In my neighborhood association, I was clerk of the Zoning and Licensing Committee and a board member of the neighborhood association where I helped make sure that neighbors' voices were heard with respect to any development. And I've done it again as a state representative. With respect to development right at the water's edge, in flood zones, we have to be particularly careful and have a much higher level of scrutiny. And this issue is particularly important based on what recently happened. When Sandy hit Massachusetts shores, it could have looked just like New Jersey if it hit 2 hours different than when it did. That shocked everyone. In the legislature, I started working on the issue and found out that a lot of the flood projections are not well modeled. People use what they call a bathtub model, where it's like if the water rose 6 feet, where would it go? Instead of storm surge model. And so with Senator Brownsberger and Representative Russian, in the budget we funded a study based out of UMass Boston to get better modeling of the Charles River Basin, my current district, and the Mystic River Basin, so that we could make sure that the infrastructure around here is sufficient to withstand these new, stronger storms that we're seeing because of climate change. And I would continue to work on that to improve modeling in the Boston Harbor Basin, which I know the city of Boston has been working on along with the state, and to make sure that we have appropriate modeling so that the protections we put in place are sufficient. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Rizzo.
Thank you very much. New England is impacted by rising sea levels more so than almost anywhere else in the world. That's our unfortunate luck. We know that climate change is real. We know that sea levels are rising. And we have to be extremely careful whenever developing on our waterfronts. I'll speak for myself, and I venture to say it's the same in the city of Boston. We have antiquated zoning laws that have not kept up with not only the changing climates, but the changing demographics and the number of cars on the road and the number of people living, the density that we're experiencing. So, it's important for those of us that live in waterfront communities like Revere, like Winthrop, that we pay close attention and scrutinize every single project that is proposed on the waterfront. I mean, obviously I'm not intimately familiar with the project here. It's only been the last couple of months that we've been involved as senatorial candidates. But what I have learned is that this project is going to impact a lot of people's views. There's people that are concerned about access to the water, which is extremely important to me, and I know it's extremely important to you. And so it's important that any development, certainly waterfront development, we work hand in hand with residents. Projects always go much better when developers, city officials, and state officials work together to make sure that that we're all on the same page. And in this case, it doesn't appear that to be the case. So, as representatives of your area, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that whatever goes forward, if anything were to go forward here, is done by the letter of the law. And that includes Chapter 91, it includes zoning, and it includes a comprehensive plan for the future. So that's something I think that we all need to be cognizant of, and certainly as a senator of this district, something that I would work very closely on with Mayor Walsh.
Thank you. Paul Rodgers.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat anything that's already been said in there. Talked certainly about FEMA flood zones and that, and I'm completely in agreement as far as following the law in terms of development and making sure that developments that are proposed do follow the lines. But the reality is that at the same time, we have to step back and say, hey, we've got some developers that are making millions and millions of dollars off of property that within our neighborhoods. And so we need to hold them to high standards. In fact, and we successfully did that. We actually have some developments that are fit very similar sort of paradigm that we're seeing here along the waterfront here, North End and along the waterfront for Boston Harbor. And we actually were able to get the developers proposed going actually above what's the base minimum needed for floodplain developments. And so I'd actually like to go see a step further and say, hey, let's see if we can try to keep the developers going above these floodplain requirements and base minimum requirements, so that we're not left with developments that are damaged or otherwise derelict or abandoned. Maybe not in 10 years or 20 years, but some number of years down the line, we don't want to be left with these developments and have them have the developer, be somewhere else. 20 years down the line, they've already made their money off the neighborhood. We as residents and businesses here have to live with these for a long time. So I think keeping these developers, pushing their standards above what is required shouldn't be something that's kept off the table. Why not? Why can't they? They're making certainly a lot of money here. I think that's one thing that's often left, not necessarily just meeting the bare minimum. And we can get these kinds of as a community, give feedback to the developers to get these kinds of concessions from them. So that'll be my standpoint from a senatorial perspective as far as supporting what the neighborhood needs are.
Thank you very much. Everyone was well under time, so that's great. We are moving apace. I do want to remind everyone, assuming we can keep on pace, there will be a meet and greet session of this after the formal questioning is ended. We're going to have the candidates will be flowing or through the audience, or the audience will be flowing through the candidates, depending on your perspective. And you'll get a chance to meet. So I wanted to highlight that. But I want to also ask our first questioner from the audience to ask her question, and this is Jennifer Crampton.
Hi, thank you all for being here tonight. So the BRA claims to be a planning agency, yet the most recent plan for Boston's waterfront is 30 years old. The modern day challenges facing waterfront communities are drastically different from those confronted 30 years ago. And here's the question. Would you push the BRA to develop a more comprehensive plan for the waterfront development that takes into account the risks of overdevelopment, traffic, and climate resiliency?
Thank you. I'm going to mix things up as I promised, and we're going to go, instead of left to right, we're going to go right to left. Is that exciting? So I'm going to start with Paul.
Sure, absolutely. Whenever you're talking about community development and pushing the BRA to start changing, the requirements that are set forth, particularly for sensitive areas like along the waterfront here, it really needs to be community driven first off. Now, there's certainly issues with environmental requirements and the engineering side, parking, traffic related issues that of course come up. But I think the key thing is always to have the community driving what it wants to see here, what it needs to see as far as the future of development here in the local area. So yeah, believe me, I'm 100% agree with you. After all the things that I've seen in terms of community meetings, which frequently have ended up in nay votes amongst the neighborhoods, and then they end up getting approved anyway. There's a disconnect there from what's actually happening, and what the views are amongst the people who are living in the neighborhoods versus what's actually happening at the BRA. So believe me, I'm 100% for that. And as far as master planning, believe me, that has to be a targeted, a plan going forward to make sure that, the community gets their input long before a developer sets a shovel into the ground.
Thank you. Dan?
Yep. Jennifer, thank you for that question. And it goes back to, at least for me, the last question. A lot of zoning changes, a lot of zoning, local zoning maps haven't changed, in your case, the BRA in 30 years. I mean, clearly, the North End has changed over the last 30 years. I mean, I can remember, I don't know how many of you are long-term North Enders, but I can remember the days probably close to 30 years ago, going down the North End, the old European restaurant, and it was a different neighborhood back in those days. It's completely different today, and zoning has to change with that. This is before I was mayor, as a city councilor, I recognized that as populations grew, as density expanded, we needed to look at our own local zoning maps in Revere. We realized there was an influx of building going on in the 100-year floodplain. We've completely eliminated that now. And we've changed, but unfortunately, even in my own city, we've kind of piecemealed the zoning. There needs to be a more comprehensive zoning, and as Paul said, and I do agree, it's got to be in conjunction with neighbors. Unfortunately, I think generally speaking, the public is so skeptical of elected officials now because they think that decisions are made behind closed doors. And that should not be the case. It should always be inclusive with the neighborhoods, talking about what their wants and what their needs are. And so, but in the case of the BRA, not making any amendments or accounting for the changing circumstances in the North End, they absolutely have to take a look at that and make the necessary changes.
Thanks. Jay?
Thanks. You mentioned that the projections for climate change have changed, but zoning has also changed. And I've pushed the BRA in my state rep district to improve the zoning. And we've gotten changes, and we're about to go into effect in Beacon Hill and Back Bay, where there was temporary overlay district that's being removed. And then also, more recently on Stewart Street in Back Bay, the BRA released a more comprehensive zoning plan that took into account things that aren't taken into account typically in the zoning plan. So zoning typically people think of as height and FAR, but this took into account traffic patterns. It was more specific with respect to bicycles in a way that the Boston zoning code isn't. It took into account if you exceeded certain heights, you had greater obligations for affordable, you had greater obligations for mitigation, and there was more of an interplay, much more sophisticated zoning. And there should be an update of the zoning code. I'm pleased that the Walsh administration, with respect to certain parts of the city, has undertaken that effort, and I would encourage them to do the same here. With respect to climate change specifically, I've worked on this again at the state level, where there's a bill in the state legislature, a comprehensive plan for climate change adaptation that I'm a co-sponsor of and advocate for, which would come up with a statewide plan for climate change and how all municipalities along the coast would deal with it. And a push for that, and also again, the modeling that I work for in my state rep district to make sure that in the Charles River Basin, if the dam at the head of the basin isn't sufficient, there'll be significant flooding throughout the district. Working to make sure we have proper modeling about what exactly that dam will withstand, and I would work on the same with respect to the harbor as the state senator. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Please, Diana.
I absolutely believe that we need a new master plan. I think this neighborhood needs a new master plan. I think every neighborhood needs a master plan, and that means having a strong community process, and we need to take the time as a community to envision and dream and imagine what the future of this neighborhood and every neighborhood should be. We need to move slow so we can move fast, so once we decide what we want, that there's enough buy-in and we've gone through the time to move the development through. And I've spent my entire career ensuring that the community's voice is heard in government, and so community process, a strong community process, and ensuring that the community's voice is heard in any master plan is absolutely something I believe in.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Joe.
Yes, I've seen the master plan for the waterfront that's oversold, and I realize that it doesn't even encompass the entire waterfront, which is now the north end. The plan is from about 20 years ago when the north end was a lot different. And I'm practical. I can't tell you and stand before you and tell you I'm going to change the zoning codes to do that, because I know that's a city issue and not something we can legislate for. But what I can promise you is to work with the city council in Boston, the mayor in Boston, and you know, talk to them about changing zoning codes and bring you to the table and be a strong advocate for you as a community leader and as an elected official to the state senate from the north end to speak and act on your behalf in those community meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're definitely going pace. I just wanted to see, do we have a watch out for Lydia? That hasn't arrived? Okay, great. We will keep her chair, even though it does feel like a reverse musical chairs game right now. So we're going to go out to the audience again for our second audience town hall style question. And our second questioner is Barbara McNeil. Please stand and ask the question. Thank you.
So thank you for coming. Boston's Harborwalk is a treasure that our entire community has a responsibility to maintain and respect. Despite numerous citations for illegally parked cars and for not maintaining fire lanes, the current owner of the property surrounding Lewis Wharf has willfully, over several years, neglected his portion of the Boston Harborwalk. So my question is the following. Would you hold waterfront property owners accountable to uphold the illegal obligations to maintain Boston's Harborwalk? I assume that's an easy answer. More importantly is how.
Thank you very much for the question. We're going to mix it up again. I'm going to start from sort of the middle. I'll start with Diana, and then I'm going to randomly call her.
The Harborwalk is, as you said, a treasure and essential to the community, and I think that it's actually a commitment required by the Department of Environmental Protection. So I would work and push the regulatory agencies to ensure that the Harborwalk is maintained, and if they're not doing so, then I would expect and hope that the Attorney General would take part.
Thank you. Dan, how about you to take it next?
Sure. Absolutely, laws are laws. I mean, the Harborwalk is a treasure, and the all waterfront property is a treasure. And, unfortunately, you have people, whether it's on the waterfront or not on the waterfront, that think they can break the law and not be held responsible or pay no consequences. Just by example, we had people, and again, it's not specific to the Harborwalk, but we had a real problem with overcrowding and people putting more people into properties than what they should. And so we implemented a safe housing task force that held these property owners to the fire. We increased fines exponentially. We embarked on a system that actually allowed us to take properties if property owners did not conform. So I think, far too often we take a very soft approach and we say cross this line, cross that line, cross this line, and we keep moving the goalposts further and further back. I think it's very important that we hold property owners responsible and liable and actually have penalties that count, not just minimal fines and other penalties that have really no consequence. So something with teeth in it, I think, is going to be something that can be very helpful.
Thank you. Joe, did you go ahead?
Sure. I think the Harborwalk is important. I think that the property owners, when they bought the property, knew they had this obligation to the community to maintain the Harborwalk. I'm sure the city's levying fines on these people, but I think the state agencies too do need to levy fines against these people and enforce it. And enforce it through takings and enforce it through taxes on the property that the state agencies can enforce. So I think we need to make it a state issue through the Department of Environment to DEP, and have the Attorney General take some steps to enforce those laws. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Jay to answer next.
Thank you. The Harborwalk and all the connections in and around the waterways are crucial to these neighborhoods. I am married, and from the time I the first date with my wife was a walk along the Harborwalk to the seaport. We regularly enjoy this. Our first child was born on Sunday. I can't wait to take him down on the river and along the harbor. And these connections and the pathways and the park are the key to the happiness of a lot of people around here. None of us have yards. None of us, if we want to have outdoor space, we have to use these connections. And in my district, I've worked on improving these connections, making improvements to the Esplanade, improving the bike paths, such as creating underpasses that are being installed right now by MassDOT on the bridges along the Charles River, and making sure that people can fully enjoy these connections. When I've had to deal with somebody that's not following the law, I've done two things as a state representative. First is reach out to the owner and try to directly address it. It sounds like that will not be successful in this case. And then work with the appropriate authorities to bring attention to the matter. And then also, as an elected official, bring public pressure to the matter. In various cases, I've brought newspapers, local newspapers, attention to issues, and often the combined pressure of a regular coming down on somebody with the public pressure is what makes the difference. And I've done that several times as a state representative, and would do it as the state senator for protecting this district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paul, you're adequate now.
Thank you for bringing up this great topic. I mean, I'm jealous of you guys here. I live over across the harbor. Our Harborwalk is certainly a bit younger than it is over on this side of the harbor, but nevertheless, it is going to be key to hold the direct abutters for these properties, for the Harborwalk here, accountable. They are, to a certain extent, taking advantage of it, either they're profiting from it or taking advantage of it, certainly. And so we definitely need to look out as far as from your government officials to say we need to work from the state level, from the city level, and local enforcement and state agency enforcement to make sure that these landowners, these property owners are getting fined. And if the fines are not working, then we need to say, hey, do we have an issue here of are fines appropriate at appropriate levels for the damage or neglect that is happening here? I think we need to potentially evaluate that. That might be more city or state level, depending on what sort of violation is occurring. But either way, we need to assess whether or not those fines are making a difference. And if they're not, then we need to address those directly. Make sure that issue of neglect comes up. It's addressed.
Great, thank you very much. Now we have one more question left, and which we should do right now. I'm going to introduce the questioner. I do have to point out the fourth and last questioner, this is the last question, is the most recent co-winner of the NEWRA Good Citizens Award, and for the beautiful display of flowers at the Prince Building, and that is Michael Mom.
I was honored by the award, thank you. I have a question I think you probably already answered, but I'm going to ask it anyways. The proposed Lewis Wharf Hotel project has elicited deep opposition from the neighborhood, elected officials, and environmental experts. Over 1,100 community members have signed a petition in opposition to the proposed development, including nearly 800 from the Suffolk First and Middlesex district. All three local elected officials representing the North End, including former Senator Pettruccelli, and all 3 at-large councilors have publicly stated their opposition to the project. Question: will you publicly oppose the proposed luxury hotel on Lewis Wharf? That can be a yes or no answer. Because there's a little more time, I'd like to, if I can just add one more question, is that a number of you have said that we should work with our mayor, and some of us may feel that things are going on behind closed doors. It's exactly what we feel. We feel the mayor is not listening. So you're on the state level. Maybe you could give us some advice as to what we should be doing. The critical issue here is Chapter 91. And if there's any advice you can give us as citizens who are very concerned, who are passionate about this neighborhood, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And so I'm going to go back to the easy thing, and we're going to go left to right again. So let's start with Joe.
Yes, so I would stand with, and I recognize Representative Michlewitz is in the room now. I would stand with Representative Michlewitz, Councilor Mattina in opposition, and all of you, it seems pretty clearly, in opposition to the Lewis Wharf Hotel. I think it's important in a community like the North End, we need to, development's not always bad, right? But what we need to do with development is balance the needs, of developers and people, and making sure housing is affordable and there's a market for housing out there. But we need to also balance the character of this neighborhood. We need to balance the character of this waterfront and ensure it's sensible to our long-term plans. To have long-term plans is important, and I think back to the original question, we need to develop a long-term plan for the entire waterfront. I think what you can do is keep doing what you are doing. You put up a good fight. I don't think any candidate here has walked within 500 feet of the North End without hearing about Lewis Wharf. You're bringing the fight to the city, and that's what you need to keep on doing. You have to make sure that environmentally, from the state side, the state agency, the DEP, can create some red tape for the city and developers in this. And I think that's where your efforts should be focused, on the environmental concerns and the environmental issues concerning that project from a state side. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We'll go next to Diana.
First, congratulations, Michael, on the Good Citizen Award. I didn't want to let that go. I know, so congratulations, I want to acknowledge that first. Yeah, I absolutely oppose the project, and I think that development needs to be in line and consistent with the character and concerns of the community. And I would agree, I mean, I applaud you all. It's like this winter night and you're out in full force, ensuring that we know that it's important to you, and also that your elected officials know that it's important to you. I think this is really advocacy at its best. So I would agree that you continue to do this, and that I think this is what it's all about. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Jay.
Thank you. So the answer is yes. And I agree with what Diana just said. It is impressive that you're holding a forum specifically regarding one development, and you've gotten all the senator, or many of the senatorial candidates to come out and talk about it. And so you're doing the right things. And it can be difficult at times to deal with the BRA. I know because I've dealt with them for many, many projects in my 3 years as a representative. And you work on a combination of things. And I'm sure you have great representation with Aaron Michlewitz, and I know that because I've worked with him on many projects. Sure, he's talked to the mayor about this. You can talk to the mayor.
We have talked to
And continue the pressure. Continue to write letters. Continue to gather signatures. Continue to have your voice heard. And for projects in my districts, I always try to get the community concerns addressed if the development can happen. Sometimes that's not possible. There was one development in the West End where it wasn't possible to accommodate the community interests and the developers. And so we started a letter writing campaign. I stood up in public meetings and said for people to contact the mayor. The mayor got a little upset at me. But I stood with the community and fought for what they want, what my constituents want. And having elected leaders do that and having constituents do that That's how you're going to make a difference, continuing the efforts. And I'd be proud to stand with you as a state senator and along with Representative Michlewitz and Councilor Valentine. Thank you.
Thanks. Dan?
Well, I'm not going to break tradition, so I'm going to say yes. Standing in opposition with the neighborhood. There are obvious concerns. Zoning is one of them. What is allowed to go there under current zoning without any variances, that's something that obviously needs to be looked at. Chapter 91, that goes back to the colonial days, it used to be known as the public trust doctrine, that says that our shoreline doesn't belong to any one person, but it belongs to all of us, and we should all have access to the waterfront. So that's something I think that is extremely important, that if something were to go there, if it is unstoppable because of zoning or because of other circumstances, Chapter 91 is always a major concern of mine as somebody who has been mayor in an oceanfront community, and it's something that I'm going to stand with you on and make sure that you always have access to your waterfront. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Paul?
Again, yes, I'm steadfastly opposed to this project. And it's not merely because I'm here and amongst a clearly anti-hotel crowd, and that's good to see. But the reality is that I think the key is whenever you have these kinds of community meetings and a consensus on views towards developments in this particular light, it really needs to be the deference back to the community and say, hey, you know what, that needs to be a key decision-making point for the BRA. I think to this point, unfortunately, BRA has just been kind of, at least the feeling amongst a lot of people I talk to in the neighborhoods is just simply out there to approve different projects. And I think that disconnect is the key. It's certainly a key issue. Now, as far as some advice, now I come from a background of getting people active, involved, putting pressure on the powers that be, in this case the VRA and the mayor's office, and I've seen that work firsthand in many different circumstances. In fact, it happened just here recently with Massport expansion at the airport. The community came together, put the pressure onto the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection to ensure that full environmental review was completed, and that happened strictly because of the community feedback, the pressure that was put on the politicians to come out and make a statement along with the community to take action that the community wants. And I think that's a key piece of the piece here. We've been able to get we've been able to push a lot of appropriate Chapter 91 related development along our waterfront in East Boston. I think it can definitely happen here, but it really needs to be community driven, community pressured in this case, and against this particularly not so great development, not so well conceived development. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank all the candidates for answering all of the questions that we provided. That was great that you could all be here. Those were great questions as well. We have a lot more. Before we do our meet and greet, and we have refreshments in the back, I'm going to want to give you an update on a city council hearing that happened today, which involved the BRA and their request to have a 10-year reauthorization of the urban renewal zones. But before I do that, I would like to ask our representative, Aaron Michlewitz, to say a few words to the audience, if you would like, either from this podium or not.
No, I'll just do it from back here. I just want to thank you all for putting on this forum tonight, and I want to thank the candidates. You know, we have some really good candidates running for this seat. A lot of them I like. I've worked with in other things in the past, and they're all doing good. I know a couple of them weren't here tonight, or I believe, but I want to thank them all for being here tonight, and just thank you all for your continued efforts. Not just on the Lewis Wharf project, but on the neighborhood as a whole. It's it is an honor to represent you, and in the state legislature. And I'm going to get to work with one of these people here today, so I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Some of our candidates are going to have to leave. So I'm going to let anyone who needs to leave, and let anyone who needs to go pursue them as they leave just alone do that. And so thank you again. I will dismiss the candidates. I will, as I promised, tell folks while you guys are doing what you're doing, that there was a city council hearing today to discuss and debate the urban renewal zone extensions. From all the body language, so the mayor asked for fully 10-year reauthorization, even though we asked for a lesser amount of time. The BRA is moving full steam asking for that. The council seems to be sort of split. There are a lot of councilors that are with a shortened reauthorization, which is what NEWRA is for, which is what all the other neighborhood associations are for, but not all the city councilors seem to be in line with that. So I am just going to tell everyone the letters to the city councilors are really, really important right now. Letters from you, letters from individuals. NEWRA has a space on our website that can help you write a letter, and if you need further help, just get in touch with any of us. NEWRA also has a membership table here, so if anyone wants to join the Residents Association, you can do it very easily right here. And with that, I'm going to say we have...
Can you explain what the difference is?
Oh, sure.
I don't understand it, and maybe other people do. But.
Well, let me just say this. People have asked me, well, who cares? Urban renewal zone, what does that mean? There's one really important point that residents, citizens should keep in mind if there's an urban renewal zone. If you're in an urban renewal zone and the BRA decides we're moving forward with this project, you have no legal recourse. You cannot appeal to after the Zoning Board of Appeals to the appeals court. No appeal possible. If you are not in an urban renewal zone, the standard legal appeal process is still in place. So oddly, the urban renewal zones include a suspension of constitutional rights, which is a mystery to me. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't even understand how that can happen. But that's the most important thing. So no appeal if it's in an urban renewal zone. And that's one of the reasons developers like urban renewal zones. So if you, like me, think, boy, you know, citizens' rights are really important, and I want my day in court if something goes massively wrong, because, you know, sometimes the BRA is not fallible, as we've learned. It's really important that you let your city councilors know that you don't want these urban renewal zones extended indefinitely. The BRA makes a point that it's going to take some time to sunset, so we're suggesting give them 2 years. That's it, 2 years, not 10.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
This is a question about mechanics. Is it there, assuming these people are all Democrats, is there going to be a primary to get one candidate to run against one Republican for the state Senate seat?
Well, the Republicans are fielding a candidate. I think he was invited to this. There was an attempt to invite him. He has a Facebook page, but he doesn't seem to monitor it. So it's not clear, like, you know. Okay, then that makes sense. Yeah. So I guess the answer to your question is the primary is the election, and I think that is on which day? April 12th. April 12th.
So it's just kind of a free-for-all then.
Well, an orderly election.
Thank you.
Anyhow, all right. I don't want to be the one standing between people and refreshments. So.